A reading from chapter 16 of A Peculiar Peril, entitled, Neither Ghost Bears nor Wraiths Shall Love Thee. On Rack's priority list of worries, Jonathan Lambshead's non-presence, or him being lost, currently ranked 6th, well below the top 3, which included money and money, which was followed by a vague worry that Danny, his sister, had been on the verge since they'd arrived at the mansion of telling him something important she couldn't quite bring herself to say, which was very unlike her, possibly related to those dates of hers. Below that on the worry list, the sad lack of romance in his love life due to Dusty Mansion syndrome, followed by Jonathan's absence. He'll turn up. He's off somewhere taking a piss or having an attack of the wank. Danny ignored that. TT says he's not here at all, not on the property at all, yeah? Not anywhere. Rack sighed and came to a halt, for Lester, as he had named his damaged foot, once upon a time named melodramatically Das Boot, was still throbbing, even off it, literally, which was why at the moment Lester Nee Das Boot had a drawn-on frowny face and rabbit ears drawn in non-permanent marker on its polymer surface. TT is not a bat with powers of echolocation, nor a Brighton Pier psychic, nor yet a Blackpool amusement ride. TT, my dear Danny, and here he warmed to the task, is a very confused rat who thinks he is a person because his owner has spoiled him rotten. Cheeky bastard lying to you about Jonathan. All right then, Danny scowled, turning back towards the stacks, and for your information, TT is a very clever rat who does not appreciate your scorn. It's rather more scorn for the general idea of rats and psychics than about any specific rat, Sister Blister, Rack said. You must get used to the idea of TT soon, brother, Danny replied, staring skeptical at a broken pen shell turned into an ashtray before binning it. Jonathan will turn up, Rack reassured her. Never had he spoken a truer word, but even if he had been Nostradamus, he could not have predicted the nature of Jonathan's eventual reappearance, which forever after he would describe as a wee bit over melodramatic. Reconciled to rat and sister alike, with TT even daring from the expanse of Danny's shoulder to place one admittedly cute, star-shaped pink padded paw on him, they all three were leaning against the ridiculously huge bird bath contraption, taking a break to eat the last of the pathetic prawns and cucumber slices Rack had brought with him, on stale bread, when there came an echoing sound of a door smashed open from the corridor beyond the basement. Before Rack could so much as lower the sandwich from his mouth, there came barreling out of the corridor into the basement an unfamiliar brunette woman in her mid-20s, and Jonathan looking as ashen as if he'd seen his latest grades, and pouring out behind them an oily black mist or fog or smoke that made Rack think they were fleeing some sort of fire. Was the mansion ablaze, and them trapped in the basement? But then he realized in the next second that the black mist had a face, a lost and vacant look, almost waifish, and a discernible shape, and this apparition made a sound like a shriek or scream that he did not believe was a fire alarm. "The bear gun," the woman shouted. "Shoot it with the bear gun." Rack's sandwich dropped from his hand as the wraith thing took up more and more space at incredible speed. He was proper frozen, unable to digest what he was experiencing. Incredibly, his sister Danny shouted back, "I've got this," picked up the bear gun, fell to one knee, and commanded, "Get down," to the strange woman and Jonathan, who promptly went from full-on sprint to sprawled across the floor, giving her a clear shot, which she took. There came a heart-rending growl right in his ear. There came such a sound that Rack felt it in his bones, as if he were being ripped apart by a bear's claws, a bear's fangs, a roaring in his ears. Then an impossibility, a whole bear plopped right out of the end of the bear gun, a bear fur-covered droplet that expanded into the bear proper, a white bear, no, a ghost bear, for he could see clear through the beast, that expanded and became irrationally huge, propelled with tremendous velocity at the wraith, leapt up at its foe to tear and rend, the leap timed perfectly so that the target fell to the ground, wrapped in its dread embrace, dark filaments trailing out to all sides. even as Jonathan and the woman rolled out of the way and closer to Rack. It was so brief a battle, and yet indelibly etched into Rack's memory, that ever after it would pop back up into his thoughts at odd hours, in the pale gloom right before dawn, or as he drifted off to sleep only to be brought awake by the vision. The way that the bear crunched and popped the bones of a being so ethereal, the way that the edges of the wraith began to fray and fade like an old cobweb, while more and more of its essence disappeared down the ghost bear's gullet. The moment when the wraith became immobile, reduced to prey, and how the hollow spaces that formed its eyes fixed on him, and the mouth opened in a wordless howl. Until, with a ridiculous sound, like a balloon popping in slow motion, a balloon whooshing into airlessness, the whole apparition collapsed in on itself, and with the bear getting in a few last eager gobbles, it disappeared as if it had never been there. A smell lingered as if a child had burned the wheels of his go-kart, as if a spent match had been dipped in glue. He thought he heard a last gasp, a swooning, hopeless sound that swept up the walls of the basement and was no more, while the bear, with murderous intent, all and every part of it, pure bear despite being quite translucent, turned on him, an innocent bystander, a Rack who had taken no position and done nothing more than stand there and drop part of a perfectly good prawn and cucumber sandwich to the floor. A leap, a bound before Danny or anyone could react, and though he flinched and did his best impression of someone jumping to the side, the great dirty mouth, the hot breath were upon him, and the glazed murderous eyes, and the enormous paws that intended to smite his silly head from his silly neck, and then gnaw on it for a time eternal. Except in the next moment the bear too had begun to fade, and the paw meant to kill him just soft patted his cheek, as if in fond farewell as it dissolved, and the bear's gaze that met him in that instant turned to something sad, melancholy, that pierced him to the depths of what was, presumably, his soul. Then the bear was gone, save for a disconcerting whiff of chocolate and cinnamon, and where the bear's face had been, it was just Jonathan and the woman risen from the floor, and Danny still on one knee but turned to face him, smiling as if all of this was normal and they'd just had a good day at the range or something. Titi still perched on her shoulder, part of a deranged artillery crew. "I'd say that was a good shot, yeah?" Danny said, and then stared pointedly at Rack. "At least Titi thinks so."